Dandavat Pranam. By the instruction and grace of our spiritual master, Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa, Sripad Bhakti Madhava Puri Maharaj, we are here reading Srimad Bhagavatam. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Canto 4, The Creation of the Fourth Order, Chapter 9, Text 34. Maitat Prartitam Yaratam Chikitseva Gatayusi Prasadya Jagad Atmanam Tapasa Dushprahadanam Bhavachidam Ayacheham Bhavam Bhagya Vivarjita. It is very difficult to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but in my case, although I have satisfied the soul of the whole universe, I have prayed only for useless things. My activities were exactly like treatment given to a person who is already dead. Just see how unfortunate I am, for in spite of meeting the Supreme Lord, who can cut one's link with birth and death, I have prayed for the same conditions again. Purport. Sometimes it so happens that when a devotee engages in the loving service of the Lord, they desire some material benefit in exchange for this service. This is not the proper way to discharge devotional service. Out of ignorance, of course, sometimes the devotee does so, but Dhruva Maharaj regrets his personal behavior in this connection. Text 35. Swarajyam yachato madhyan mano me bhikshito bata ishvarat china punyena valikaran ibadhana. Because of my state of complete foolishness and paucity of the pious activities, although the Lord offered me his personal service, I wanted material name, fame, and prosperity. My case is just like that of the poor man who, when he satisfied a great emperor who wanted to give him anything he might ask, out of ignorance, asked only for a few broken grains of husked rice. Purport. In this verse, the word svaragyam, swaraj, swarajyam, which means complete independence, is very significant. A conditioned soul does not know what complete independence is. Complete independence means situation in one's own constitutional position. The real independence of a living entity, who is part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is to remain always dependent on the Supreme Lord, just like a child who plays in complete independence, guided by his parents, who watch over him. The independence of the conditioned soul does not mean to fight with the obstacles offered by Maya, but to surrender to Krishna. In the material world, everyone is trying to become completely independent simply by fighting against the obstacles offered by Maya. This is called the struggle for existence. Real independence is to be reinstated in the service of the Lord. Anyone who gives to the Vaikuntha planets or Goloka, anyone who goes to the Vaikuntha planets or Goloka Vrindavan planet, is freely offering his service to the Lord. That is complete independence. Just contrary to this material overlordship, which we wrongly take to be independence, many great political leaders have tried to establish independence, but due to such so-called independence, the people's dependence has only increased. The living entity cannot be happy trying to be independent in the material world. One has to surrender, therefore, unto the lotus feet of the Lord and engage in his original eternal service. Dhruva Maharaj regrets that he wanted material opulence and greater prosperity than that of his great-grandfather, Lord Brahma. His begging from the Lord was like a poor man's asking a great emperor for a few grains of broken rice. The conclusion is that anyone who is engaged in the loving service of the Lord should never ask for material prosperity from the Lord. The awarding of material prosperity simply depends on the stringent rules and regulations of the external energy. Pure devotees ask the Lord only for the privilege of serving Him. This is our real independence. If we want anything else, it is the sign of our misfortune. Text 36. Maitreya Uvacha Navai Mukundasya Padhara Vindayo Rajojishastata Bhava Drisha Janaha Vanchanti Tadasyam Rite Ritam Atmano Yadrichaya Labdamana Samradhaya. The great sage Maitreya continued, my dear Vidura, persons like you who are pure devotees of the lotus feet of Mukunda, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who can offer liberation, and who are always attached to the honey of his lotus feet, are always satisfied in serving at the lotus feet of the Lord. In any condition of life, such persons remain satisfied, and thus they never ask the Lord for material prosperity. Purport. In the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says that He is the supreme enjoyer, the supreme proprietor of everything and anything within this creation, and the supreme friend of everyone. When one knows these things perfectly, he is always satisfied. The pure devotee never hankers after any kind of material prosperity. The karmis, jnanis, and yogis, however, endeavor always for their own personal happiness. Karmis work day and night to improve their economic condition. Jnanis undergo severe austerities in order to get liberation. And yogis also undergo severe austerities like practicing the yoga system for attainment of wonderful mystic powers. A devotee, however, is not interested in such activities. He does not want mystic powers or liberation or material prosperity. He is satisfied in any condition of life as long as he is constantly engaged in the service of the Lord. The Lord's feet are compared to the lotus where there is saffron dust. A devotee is always engaged in drinking the honey from the lotus feet of the Lord. Unless one is freed from all material desires, he cannot actually taste that honey from the Lord's lotus feet. One has to discharge his devotional duties without being disturbed by the coming and going of material circumstances. This desirelessness for material prosperity is called nishkama. One should not mistakenly think that nishkama means giving up all desires. That is impossible. The living entity is eternally existent and cannot give up desires. A living entity must have desires. That is the symptom of life. When there is a recommendation to become desireless, it is to be understood that this means that we shouldn't desire anything for our sense gratification. For a devotee, this state of mind, nihisphra, is the right position. Actually, every one of us already has an arrangement for our standard of material comforts. A devotee should always remain satisfied with the standard of comforts offered by the Lord, as stated in the Ishopanishad, Tena Tyaktena Bhunjita. This saves time for executing Krishna consciousness. Text 37. Akarnyatma jam ayantam samparetya yatagatam rajana shraddha devadram abhadrasya kutom mama. When King Uttanapad heard that his son Dhruva was coming home, as if coming back to life after death, he could not put his faith in this message, for he was doubtful of how it could happen. He considered himself the most wretched, and therefore he thought that it was not possible for him to attain such good fortune. Purport. Dhruva Maharaj, a 5-year-old boy, went to the forest for penance and austerity. The king could not at all believe that a small boy of such a tender age could live in the forest. He was certain that Dhruva was dead. He therefore could not fix his faith in the message that Dhruva Maharaj was coming back home again. For him, this message said that a dead man was coming home, so he could not believe it. After Dhruva Maharaj's departure from home, King Uttanapad thought that he was the cause of Dhruva Maharaj's leaving, and thus he considered himself the most wretched. Therefore, even though it was possible that his lost son was coming back from the kingdom of death, he thought that since he was most sinful, it was not possible for him to be so fortunate as to get back to his lost son. Text 38. Shradhaya Bhakyam Devarser Harshavegena Darshita Vartahartur Atiprito Haram Pradan Mahadanam. Although he could not believe the words of the messenger, he had full faith in the word of the great sage Narada. Thus he was greatly overwhelmed by the news, and he immediately offered the messenger a highly valuable necklace and great satisfaction. Texts 39 through 40. Sad asvam ratam aruhya kartashvara parishkritam brahmanai kula vridhaischa aryasto matya bandhubi shankadundu binadena brahma goshena venubi nischakrama puraturnam atmaja bhiksha nochuka. Then King Uttanapad, being very eager to see the face of his lost son, mounted a chariot drawn by excellent horses and bedecked with golden filigree. Taking with him many learned brahmanas, all the elderly personalities of his family, his officers, his ministers, and his immediate friends, he immediately left the city. As he proceeded in this parade, there were auspicious sounds of conch shells, kettle drums, flutes, and the chanting of Vedic mantras to indicate all good fortune. Text 41. Suniti suruchistrasya mahisya rukma bhushite arhuya shidvikam sardam utamenhabya jagmatu. Both the queens of King Uttanapad, namely Suniti and Saruchi, along with his other son, Uttama, appeared in the procession. The queens were seated on a palanquin. Purport. After the departure of Dhruva Maharaj from the palace, the king was very afflicted, but by the kind words of Saint Narada, he was partially satisfied. He could understand the great fortune of his wife Suniti and the great misfortune of his queen Saruchi, for these facts were certainly very open in the palace. But still, when the news reached the palace that Dhruva Maharaj was returning his mother Suniti, out of her great compassion and due to being the mother of a great Vaishnava, did not hesitate to take the other wife Saruchi and her son Uttama on the same palanquin. That was the greatness of Queen Suniti, the mother of the great Vaishnava Dhruva Maharaj. Texts 42 through 43. Tamdristvo pavanabhasya ayantam tarasaratat avarhya nripasturnam asadhya prema vivala parire benga jam durbhyam dirgot kanta manasvasan vishvakshenan grisam sparsha hatasheshagha bandhanam. Upon seeing Dhruva Maharaj approaching the neighboring small forest, King Uttanapad with great haste got down from his chariot. He had been very anxious for a long time to see his son Dhruva, and therefore with great love and affection he went forward to embrace his long-lost boy. Breathing very heavily, The king embraced him with both arms. But Dhruva Maharaj was not the same as before. He was completely sanctified by spiritual advancement due to having been touched by the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus ends our reading for today. We'll continue from text 44 on Wednesday. Are there any questions or comments from the assembled devotees? Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Sripad Bhakti Madhava Puri Maharaj Ki Jai.
Jai.
Jai Srila Prabhupada, Srila Guru Maharaj, Srila Guru Dev, Srila Acharya Dev, Srila Shanta Maharaj Ki Jai.
Jai.
Jai Rupanuga Guru Varga Ki Jai. All
Jai.
glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the worldwide devotees. Sama Bhaktivedanta Vrinda Ki Jai.
Jai.
Jai Navadvip Dham Ki Jai. Nishangapali Dham Ki Jai.
Jai.
Mayapur Dham Ki Jai.
Jai.
Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai. Jagannath Bali Subhadra Ju
Jai.
Ki Jai. Ganga Mai Yamuna Mai Ki Jai.
Jai.
Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Giri Govind Gupta Govind Dham Ki Jai.
Jai.
Dham Kund Radha Kund Ki Jai. Tulsi Devi Bhakti Devi Vrinda Devi Ki Jai.
Jai.
Jai Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai.
Jai.
Jai Harinam Sankirtan Yajna Ki Jai. Scientific Sankirtan Yajna Ki Jai. Princeton Bhaktivedanta Institute Ki Jai. Sri Chaitanya Saraswat Institute Ki Jai. Sri Chaitanya Saraswat Mat Ki Jai.
Jai.
Jai Gaura Pimanandi Hari 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 Bol. Jai Sripad Ananda Krishna Prabhu Ki Jai.
Jai Sripad Krishna Keshava Prabhu Ki Jai.
Jai Gurudev. Prabhu, Dandavats. Have a wonderful day.
Okay, it's very nice, Prabhu. Also,
Yes. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.